Arjuna said, "By my hearing the instructions you have kindly given me about these most confidential spiritual subjects, my illusion has now been dispelled." So repeat. Arjuna said, "By my hearing the instructions you have kindly given me about these most confidential spiritual subjects, my illusion has now been dispelled." Purport by His Divine Grace, this chapter reveals Krishna as the cause of all causes. He is even the cause of the Mahavishnu, from whom the material universes emanate. Krishna is not an incarnation. He is the source of all incarnations. That has been completely explained in the last chapter. Now, as far as Arjuna is concerned, he says that his illusion is over. This means that Arjuna no longer thinks of Krishna as a mere human being or as a friend of his, but as the source of everything. Arjuna is very enlightened and is glad that he has such a great friend as Krishna. But now he was thinking that although he may accept Krishna as the source of everything, others may not. So in order to establish Krishna's divinity for all, he is requesting Krishna in this chapter to show his universal form. Actually, when one sees the universal form of Krishna, one becomes frightened, like Arjuna. But Krishna is so kind that after showing it, he converts himself again into his original form. Arjuna agrees to what Krishna has several times said. Krishna is speaking to him just for his benefit. So Arjuna acknowledges that all this is happening to him by Krishna's grace. He is now convinced that Krishna is the cause of all causes and is present in everyone's heart as Supersoul. Now, text 2 and translation by Srila Prabhupada. O lotus-eyed one, I have heard from you in detail about the appearance and disappearance of every living entity and have realized your inexhaustible glories. Please repeat. O lotus-eyed one, I have heard from you in detail about the appearance and disappearance of every living entity and have realized your inexhaustible glories. And purport, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti-yoga Swami Prabhupada. Arjuna addresses Lord Krishna as lotus-eyed, which Krishna's eyes appear just like the petals of a lotus flower, out of his joy. For Krishna has assured him in a previous chapter, Aham Kritsnasya Jagata Prabhava Palaya Stata, which means, I am the source of the appearance and disappearance of this entire material manifestation. Arjuna has heard of this from the Lord in detail. Arjuna further knows that in spite of his being the source of all appearances and disappearances, he is aloof from them. As the Lord has said in the 9th chapter, he is all-pervading, yet he is not personally present everywhere. That is the inconceivable opulence of Krishna, which Arjuna admits that he has thoroughly understood. So this chapter, the Universal Form, is a very mystical chapter. It's a very mystical description, actually. In fact, it reminds me of how sometimes you'll see, I don't know about here in India, but in the West, you'll see these advertisements in New Age magazines or Indian newspapers, where even the Indian guru will talk about, giving you the means to achieve cosmic consciousness. Cosmic consciousness. So who wouldn't want cosmic consciousness? So they try to entice you to come in and be a part of their program so you can get cosmic consciousness. But until they understand the Vishvarupa, or the universal form, they don't know what cosmic consciousness means. Because in the universal form, You see all the demigods, all the planets, the source of creation. You see the destruction of everything. You see the creation of all living entities. And everything that's in the cosmos is there within the cosmic manifestation, or the universal form. And of course, we know also the universal form, though it is all about showing the power of Krishna, it's still, nonetheless, a temporary form. It's not the eternal form. It only exists as long as the cosmic manifestation exists. So when anybody tells you about cosmic consciousness, basically, once again, it means through this we can understand that they're talking about a temporary form of enlightenment, a temporary perspective of how consciousness pervades everything, but still it is not the spiritual aspect, it is not the spiritual form, and certainly not the spiritual or the eternal form of Lord Krishna. That's why when Arjuna sees this universal form, he becomes frightened. Now, is that the position that God wants us to have, being frightened? Because in bhakti-yoga, as far as I know, I could be wrong, but as far as I know, it's all about attaining the love of God. How can you attain love for something that you're frightened of? So this is the difference here. Krishna, Krishna is bluish. So why is Krishna bluish? Who knows why Krishna is bluish? Anybody know? There's different answers. So, I mean, there's, no answer is necessarily wrong. But does anybody know why Krishna is blue? Chandrasekhar, you know why Krishna.
There's different answers for those.
Right, I know.
Because the sky's blue, it's his eternal prerogative.
He's blue because that is the color of eternal, loving nature. Krishna is the God of love. And Krishna is blue because he has never-ending and unconditional love for his parts and parcels, which includes you and me. Of course, on the other hand, remember, he reciprocates as we surrender unto him. So in other words, the more love we give to Krishna, the more love he gives back to us. That's the whole purpose of bhakti-yoga. So, and the whole purpose of that is to know how to love Krishna so that we can have an eternal reciprocal relationship with him. Now, you can't necessarily have an eternal reciprocal relationship with something that causes you fear. And we can also understand that in many religions, that is the conception of God. That's why they're called fear-based religions. And that's usually the conventional monotheistic religions that right now seem to pervade much of the world. We're going to change that, though, as we proceed to spread Krishna consciousness. But the point of it is, you cannot have an eternal loving relationship with something that you're afraid of. You may have awe and reverence, you may have respect, you may feel that, I better do what God tells me to do, otherwise he's going to send me to eternal damnation or something like that. But you notice that that's not really how it's described in the Bhagavad-gita. Basically, you create your own future, you create your own relationship with God simply by developing a loving and surrendering nature towards God. It's up to you. Krishna's basically just waiting for you to, wake up. And so in this chapter we find that now Arjuna has been completely enlightened. His illusion has been dispelled because, as Prabhupada explains, Arjuna finally understands that Krishna is not just his friend, he's a devoted. Arjuna is devoted to his friend. But he's more than that. Krishna is the source of all worlds, all living entities. He's the sum and substance of everything. He pervades the whole universe. So now he's becoming enlightened. And so he asks, can you please show me this universal form? And not everybody can attain this vision of this universal form. And not everybody can attain this cosmic consciousness, which some people declare to be able to give to everybody else. So later in the chapter, Krishna explains that now I give you divine eyes. And with divine eyes, you can see my universal form. So this is basically the whole process of the Vedic path. The Vedic path, naturally, is meant to deliver people from the mode of ignorance to the mode of passion to the mode of goodness. And with the right sadhana, the right instructions, it propels you into the mode of pure goodness, Sudasattva. Then you can begin to start seeing things as they are. Because remember, the modes of material nature are like different frequencies that pervade this planet. And if you're primarily situated in the mode of tamas, or ignorance, or rajas, or passion, or sattva, or goodness, that is the frequency level in which your consciousness exists. Some people say that, oh yes, I live in a house, or I live in my clothes, or I live here or there. The point of it is, where you really live is up here in your consciousness. That's where you really live, because that's how you function, and that's how you project your vision of what goes on around you and how you interact with other people. It is your consciousness. And depending on which mode of nature you're in, that's the frequency level in which you exist, and in which you perceive things, and also in which you project your personality, your actions, your activities, and things like that. So the whole point of the Vedic system and bhakti-yoga in general is to reach the level by which our consciousness becomes purified or spiritualized. Because just remember this one thing: if this is all you get out of this class, then I'll be happy. The point is, the more spiritual you become, the more you can perceive that which is spiritual. Do you understand that? The more spiritual our consciousness becomes, the more we enter into that frequency level in which we're always acting and perceiving things from a spiritual perspective. And when we begin to act and interact on that level, then basically we can perceive that which is spiritual. Because remember, the material world is temporary, the spiritual world is eternal, but it also pervades everything. It's like when I was talking about frequencies. Have you ever seen a chart of frequencies? It goes from long wave radio waves, to all the way up to short wave. It includes ultraviolet, infrared, radio waves, television waves. All these different things are included. And in that big chart, it's like this. If this was a chart from that end to that end, there'd be a little section right about here where you can see the colors of black, white, pink, red, green. It's only a little fragment of that whole chart of different frequencies which exist. And that's also like the frequencies of the modes of material nature. So within those frequencies, we begin to enter into the spiritual levels so that we can perceive and interact on that spiritual dimension. And the more spiritual we become, then the more we can perceive that which is spiritual. An example of that is Srila Prabhupada. He once said that, I can see when we offer the bhoga to the deities, I can see the deities partake of the offering, but you cannot. That's the difference. He's already existing in the spiritual dimension, and we are simply looking up trying to get there. But the point of it is, if we follow this path of bhakti-yoga properly, and if we become even a little bit successful, then we can start having a glimpse into that spiritual dimension. Most of the pujaris, for example, when a pujari has been working with the deities for years, they can usually begin to tell when the deities are happy about something, when they're not happy about something, or when something is troubling the deities, something's going on somewhere because they're not looking happy. Oh, you can tell. Yes, I can tell. The pujaris get to know the deities that way. In other words, they're beginning to see that spiritual dimension which exists all around us. So it's like the radio waves. Somebody may say, well, I don't believe in radio waves. I think you're full of poppycock, you know. But then at the same time, if you have a receiver, then not only can you pick up the radio waves, but there's so many things you can do with them. So the mind, the consciousness is like the receiver that we need to develop so that we can receive and interact in that spiritual dimension. Then we can also begin to see the deities actually interact with us or interact with those that are serving them. Sometimes people can see the deities look at the different devotees in front of them during darshan. Or sometimes other things begin to happen. And anybody that's on the path of bhakti-yoga will definitely at some point begin to have their own spiritual experiences with the deities, or with their own understanding, their own perception of what spiritual life is all about. And that is what's expected of the Vedic path. The Vedic path expects you not to simply start with faith, but to start with faith and then end with spiritual realizations, your own spiritual realizations. It's not a religion which bases itself on faith, beginning with faith and ending with faith, which many religions do, because they don't want you to have your own spiritual experiences, because then they lose control. Many of these religions that we see today are basically political operatives. They give you enough information to think that you're making progress, but no. You cannot have any direct relationship with God except through the institution, through the church, through the pastor, or through the Vatican, if you want to put it that way. But in Bhakti Yoga especially, under the guidance of the spiritual master, you become empowered to begin to have your own spiritual experiences.